Hello everyone and welcome to November 4th, the Wednesday of the 31st week in Ordinary Time of our liturgical year. I'm recording this on Tuesday, and depending on when you watch this, either tomorrow, Wednesday, or days after that, I'm aware that we may or may not know the results of our election. And I'm also aware of the great stress and anxiety that have accompanied these days, weeks and months really, leading up to the election. No matter the results of the election or when we find out the definitive results, I have been and will continue to pray for calm, for safety, for fairness and integrity and all that transpires in our country these days. Our country is so very wounded on many levels and in constant need of our prayers. But today is also a special day because November 4th is the feast day of St. Charles Borromeo, so it's our parish feast day. And here is a picture that I like of St. Charles because he's out among the people. And that plays a huge part in his life, to be one among the people he serves. So there's a picture of him. So what does St. Charles Borromeo have to say to us during the time in which we find ourselves? And I think he has some important things for us to consider and to reflect on. St. Charles was born in 1538 to a noble family in the town of Verona, Italy. And you might recognize that name, Arona, that's Arona Hall. And at a young age, he decided to dedicate his life to God and to the church. And his very own uncle became Pope. And when Charles was just 21, his uncle, the Pope, made Charles a cardinal, even though he had not even been ordained a priest. So this is one of those classic examples of nepotism. But what's so interesting in this is that even though Charles finds himself in a position where he could use his family name and connections to better himself, he instead devotes himself to a life that really challenges himself and others and the church itself to a deeper authenticity. He becomes a voice for reform, a voice of integrity, of truly putting the people first, putting their needs at the center of his ministry. So let's listen to these challenging words of St. Charles. Be sure that you first preach by the way you live. If you do not, people will notice that you say one thing but live otherwise. And your words will bring only cynical laughter and a derisive shake of the head. Even though those words were really directed towards priests and their preaching, I think that they're words that we can all hear and really challenge ourselves to ask if we truly are living a life that gives witness to our faith. Are we walking the walk, so to speak? He continues, if we wish to make any progress in the service of God, we must begin every day of our life with new eagerness. We must keep ourselves in the presence of God as much as possible. We have only one life, and we should spend it for Jesus Christ and souls, meaning for other people, not as we wish, but at the time and in the way God wishes. As we find ourselves during these difficult days, both of the pandemic and of what's happening in our country, I think that plea, it's almost a plea of St. Charles. That plea is so important for us. Keep ourselves in the presence of God as much as possible. There's so much that can get us off track. And St. Charles reminds us to stay close to God. So Charles eventually becomes a priest and devotes himself as the cardinal to the care of the people of Milan. He founded seminaries, improved the training for priests. At that time, there was a lot of church bribery and corruption, and he worked to root that out. He tried to improve the preaching of clergy and how people were taught about the faith. At that time he was living, it was right after the Protestant Reformation. And a lot of the criticisms levied against the church during that time had to do with the church not being authentic to the true message of Christ, that the church was giving itself over to corruption, to material goods, to things that were not important. And St. Charles took those criticisms to heart. And he said, some of those, are true. And the only way we can combat what is being said of us is to become a church that's more authentic, a church that no longer stands for corruption, a church that is grounded and rooted in the message of Jesus. So it really became the mission of his life to help the church become the best that it could be, and to answer those criticisms that had been levied against the church. Now, as you can imagine, if you're a person that's trying to bring about change, not always popular. And there was an actual assassination attempt that was made on his life, and fortunately, it was not successful. Where I think St. Charles really can speak to us during this time of our pandemic is during what he experienced during 1576 to 78, when a famine and plague struck Milan. Many priests and governmental leaders just simply fled the city. But St. Charles remained to tend to the sick, to offer sacraments, to give hope. And he ended up giving away most of his money to try to feed the thousands upon thousands of people who were starving every day. He became a symbol of faithfulness and dedication to the people of Milan. And through him, they were comforted by this sense of stability and goodness and generosity. We're at a time right now when many of us can start to feel weary with the pandemic, and I believe that the life of St. Charles calls us to see how we can be people of service, just like he was, how we can be people of stability and goodness and generosity when those qualities are so needed right now. So it's a question, how are you? How am I being called to be a presence of concern for others? Someone who is selfless, someone rooted and grounded in the life of Jesus. It's by no means easy, right? But I think it's something important for us to reflect on and ask for God's companionship during this time to help us be the best people that we can be. So as a way to celebrate our parish feast day, we will have Mass tonight at 7 o'clock. And if you can join us in person, or if you're not ready for in person just yet, join us via live stream on our YouTube channel. So whether you're at church or at home or wherever at 7 o'clock, we can be united with one another as a parish family. So to close, I'd like to share these words of St. Charles. We must meditate and pray always. This is the way we can easily overcome the countless difficulties we have to face day after day. In meditation, we find strength to bring Christ to birth in ourselves and in others. If a tiny spark of God's love already burns within you, do not expose it to the wind, for it may get blown out. Keep the stove tightly shut so that it will not lose its heat and grow cold. In other words, stay close to God. Stay quiet with God. Stay quiet with God. So happy feast day to our parish, and blessings of much peace and of deep and abiding hope to each of you.